Welcome back to Anarchy in the Ukulele. I'm here today to look at some jazz chords, which we've been doing in our Friday shows, if you've been watching those. And what I said I'd do is we'd put them all into one video so that you've got everything you need to not only play Ain't Misbehaving, which is the song we've been working on, but also any song that you want to introduce jazz chords in. This will give you an idea of how you can do it and how you work them out. So let's get straight into it. So Ain't Misbehaving, we're using the tab from a website called Ultimate Guitar Tab, but it also does ukulele chords as well, which you can see here. So the basic chords that it suggests for Ain't Misbehaving are a C chord, an A7 chord, it says over a C sharp. Don't worry about when the slash over notes on the ukulele, we're just going for the main chord. So it's a C chord, an A7 chord, D minor chord, a G chord, a C over a B flat, oh C7 sorry, over a B flat, so we're just going with the C7, an F chord, an F minor chord, an E7 chord, an A7 chord again, don't know why that's in there twice, a D7 chord, which you can play barred all the way across, or I like to do a 2-0-2-3. I think that sounds slightly nicer myself. A G7 chord, an F7 chord, an E chord. I tend to use it playing 4-4-4 and then just use those three strings. You can bar across the 4th fret and then play the 7th on the 1st string. The way they write it, which is the way a lot of people play it, I find incredibly hard, which is to play a 1-4-0-2, which I find really hard to play. You can play, if you do with your middle ring and little finger across those three strings, you can put your first finger down on the 2nd fret. Play it like that as well. So I prefer anything rather than that shape because I find that really quite hard to play. An A minor 7 chord and a D chord. Oh, there's two more sneaky little chords down the bottom there. We've got a G sharp diminished, which they're suggesting you bar along the 2nd fret and you go like that. That's not G sharp diminished, so they've got that wrong. Great. A G sharp diminished, I would play, I believe it's there, so it would be a 1-2-1-2 and then a C7 at the end. They're suggesting we go no one to talk with all by myself, no one to walk with, I'm happy on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving, saving my love for you. Which is nice. We're going to make it a little bit more jazzy now. So they're the straight chords. What we're going to introduce is some extra notes into those chords, but we're also going to change some of them. So for instance, they're starting with a C chord, going to an A7 chord, and then a D minor chord, and then to a straight G chord. What we're going to do is we're going to add a note into the C chord, we're going to add something into the A7 chord, we're going to make the G a G7 chord with also an added note into there. The D minor we're going to change into a D major 7. Just again to give it a little jazzier feel. And what you get, so with the D7, I'll just play that quickly. So we've got the C, A7, D7, G7. It just starts to add a little bit of difference into a little bit of jazziness into there. With the C chord, we're going to do what's called sort of a C6 chord. And what that means is you're adding the 6th note of the C scale into the chord. So the way you do that, again, we've covered this in the Friday shows, but just to recap that very, very quickly, is you're counting up the C scale 6 notes. So you're counting C, D, E, F, G, A. So you're adding an A into the C chord. So a normal C chord is here, and we're making it a C6. So we've counted up the 6 notes, C, D, E, F, G, A. We want to put an A into a C chord. So we've got a G on the 4th string. We've got an E, 4th fret of the 3rd string. We've got an A on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and a C on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. That gives us our C6 chord. The reason that we do it like this with barring is to play the next chord, which we're going to put in as an A7 with a flattened 5th, which is a really, really jazzy chord. Again, to work out what notes you're playing, you need to count up. So we're in the key of C, and we stay in the key of C, but we count up from the A note 5 notes, and then we're going to flatten that 5th note. So counting up from A, we're going to go A, B. I do it as if I'm playing the piano, I've noticed. But so I would go A, B, C, D, E. That's our 5th note. We want to flatten it, so we want to make it an E flat or a D sharp, or whatever is your preference. And the way we play that is we just move our middle finger from the 4th fret of the 3rd string to the 4th fret of the 1st string. And you get that lovely A7 with a flattened 5th. So you're going from C6, which is a really nice sounding chord. Just to go through the notes, I won't go through the notes of all the chords, because once you've got this way of doing it and counting up, you'll know what the notes are. So right, we have the G there. We then have that, instead of an E, we have an E flat. We have that as our A note, and then we have a C sharp because we've made it a major chord, not a minor chord. So you've got the 7th note in there. Again, count up from A. Your 7th note is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Your flattened 5th, A, B, C, D, E, flatten it to an E flat. So we've got the 7th and the flattened 5th in those first strings there, and then we've got the rest of the A7 chord, which is the A and the C sharp. That's how you work out what these chords are. So if you know that you're playing a 7th chord, like a G 7th chord, and for instance you want to put, for G7, let's say we want to put a sharpened 5th in there. So we would count up from our G, A, B, C, D. D is our 5th, sharpened 5th, D sharp or an E flat, which is the 3rd there. So we've got a G7, normal G7 shape, and then we're using our little finger to just go in on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string. And that's how we work out all of these chords. So I'm going to switch the music over now. This was the original music. If I switch over to my jazz chords that I've put in, we can now see that we've got the C6, we've got the A7 with a flattened 5th. We're then going to a D7, so normal D7 shapes. We're then going to a G7, as we've just done, and then we're adding in that sharpened 5th, counting up G, A, B, C, D, sharpen it. So we've got a D in there, because that's our C string. 2nd fret is a D, sharpening it. And the way we're going to play that is we're going to play the C6 for 2 beats, the A7 flattened 5th for 2 beats, the D7 2 beats, and then the G, first beat as a G7, 2nd beat with the sharpened 5th. So we're just adding a real sort of jazziness into it. First 4 chords, fairly jazzy. You know, 4 of them have got extra notes in. The D7 is a fairly standard, you know, you're going to get 7th chords in quite a lot of music, pop music and folk and all sorts of things. You'll always find 7th chords in there. You won't always find 6th chords or flattened 5th chords or sharpened 5th chords. They are pretty much jazz only chords. because the first four are fairly jazzy, I talked a lot in the Friday show about we then strip it back after that. And what we want to do is, if you do jazz chords for every chord throughout a song, the listener's ear kind of gets used to them and they don't sound as jazzy anymore. So you want to go back to just some normal straight chords in between the jazz chords, because then when you hit the jazz chords, they sound ultra jazzy. They sound more jazzy than if every chord was a jazz chord. So after doing our initial four chords, we're going to go to just a straight C chord. Then we're going to put in a C7 with an added 9. So our C7th chord is first fret of the first string. That's a C7th chord. Added 9th, bongo boy. Can't put you on camera, but bongo boy, what note are we adding in to get a C7th with the added 9th? What's the added 9th? This is a difficult one.
E, F, G, A, B, C, D.
D. So we're adding a D in. So we know where our D is, because when we were playing our G7, we said that was a D and then that was a D sharp. You could slide that as well, actually. So we know our D's there. So we've got C7 as normal there, and we're adding in the second fret of the third string. So our second little phrase of this, we're going from the C, which is a nice chord. So if you're ever playing a C7, that just makes it a little bit crunchier. So that's a C7 with an added 9th. With then, in the original music, it was just going to an F chord. We want to go to an F major 7, and the way I like to play this is there. An F major 7, so an F7 chord is you're putting the 7th note in, and an F7 chord is an E flat. When you're doing a 7th, you actually count up using the scale of the chord that you're trying to play. So if you're doing an F, you would count up 7 notes using an F major scale, which would be F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat is the 7th note. So you've got that. To make it a major 7th, you change the 7th note, it goes up a semitone, so it goes to an E natural. So the way that we're playing that is 5th fret, and we're playing 5 5 0 0. It's really nice. Major 7th chords are lovely chords. So that works really nicely. Then we're going to go to an F minor 9th. We're getting very complex. So again, the way to work out a 9th and a 2nd are always the same note. The reason it's notated as a 9th is because a 2nd would indicate that you're playing the note very close to the root of the chord. So if you're playing an F chord, a 2nd would be that you play a G right next to the F note. A 9th would be that there's an octave between them, or an octave and a note between them. So, and that's quite important, because a 2nd chord is quite crunchy because you've got a clash of the root note and the note directly next to it, or the tone directly next to it. A 9th gives you space, which makes it a softer sounding chord. So an F minor 9, we'd normally play our F minor here. We're not going to play anything that looks like that or add anything into that. We're going to play, think of a E minor shape, and just move the whole shape up 1 fret. And that is an F minor 9th. So within that we've got a G, which is the 9th note. Then we've got, now this is going to tax me. Yep, we've got an F, which is the root of the chord. We've got an A flat, and we've got a C. So you've got F, A flat, C, which makes up the F minor chord, and we're adding in the G at the bottom there to give us an F minor 9th. Really nice chord. So you're going from the F major 7 to the F minor 9th. It's one of the easier ones to play in this song if you can play the E minor chord, because you just move it up 1 fret. So 2 really nice chords in that bit. Again, we've gone back to the straight C chord at the beginning of that just to then emphasise the more jazzy chords. We get slightly jazzier with a C7 with an added ninth. It's not too jazzy. We then get a lovely major 7th chord on the F, and then we go full on jazz with the minor ninth. After that, you'll see the music, it then repeats back round to the C6, the A7 with the flattened fifth, the D7, the G7, adding in the sharpened fifth. And then we go to this E7, A7, D7, and then it's a G7, but we're doing a G7 with a flattened second. Yeah, with a flattened second in. In the live, I played a little turnaround for that, which went something like... I'm not going to go through that today because I just want to emphasise the chords on this, really. But if you want to play that, have a look at the Friday Show episode. Put the episode up, please, Sam. It's the second episode of Ain't Misbehavin'. And Sam will put the episode on the screen, and that will show you a little turnaround. Which is nice to do, but for today we're just going to stick to the straight jazz chords to make it as simple as possible. So with that, we're playing an E7 chord. We're sticking with that pretty much as it is. The A7, again, we're going to stick with. The D7, stick with, make it nice and simple because we've had lots of jazz chords before that. And then the G, with the flattened second, is a G7 shape. So you're playing your normal G7 shape, your 0, 2, 1, 2. And all you're doing is you're hitting that and then you're sliding up to the 4th fret. So you're going from there, which is giving you a G7 with a flattened second. Again, really nice jazzy chord. So we like that a lot. Then, after that, that is the first verse. Second verse, exactly the same until you get to the very end where you don't go to the E7 chord. And at the very end, again, we're going to simplify it because we've got lots of jazzy chords going in there. So we're going to go to a straight C chord. This is this little section here. If you can see my mouse moving around, I'll highlight it. There we go. This little section here. And the good thing about the guitar tabs as well is if you hover over them, it will give you the shapes of the chords. So if you're not sure and you're looking at these tabs and you go into guitar tabs, you can hover over them and it will tell you the chord shapes. So end of second verse, we're going to a C, we're going to an F7 chord, back to a C, and then to an E7 chord, which is leading us into the middle section, so where we start on this A minor. A minor 7, everyone knows an A minor 7 because you don't have to fret any strings at all. You can do a threaded version, which Paul likes to do, but for simplicity, we're just going to do straight across with no fretting at all. That's our A minor 7 for the like Jack Horn a bit. F7, normal F7 shape. So we've got that works, it's jazzy enough. D7 shape, again, we're just going to stick with. And then our A7, we're going to put a sharpened ninth in. Bongo boy, what's a sharpened ninth in an A7?
B.
No. Yes. No. No.
On an
A sharpened ninth.
C.
Yes. Had to think about it, but yes, it is a C. Yeah, so it's a C, which you're putting in. Again, we all know that the 3rd fret on the 1st string is a C. A normal A7 chord has a C sharp in here. You've got the G for the 7th. You've got the A on the A on the top string there, and the E. That's our normal A7th chord. A sharpened ninth means that you not only have a C sharp in the chord here, but you have a C natural in there. So it's a chord. It seems to divide opinion on this. It certainly did on the chat when we did it on the Friday show. I love it. C, a sharpened ninth chord. Beatles, Got to Get You Into My Life. Got to get you into my life. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. C, not a C, but a sharpened ninth chord. Loads of really good songs. I think what has a sharpened ninth then? It's a song called Ease On Down the Road, from the musical The Wiz, starring Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. Best sharpened ninth chord ever in that song. Look it up. I'm not going to play it. Look it up. And so yeah, sharpened ninth means that you have the minor and the major of a chord both together, and it's clashy as anything, but I love that. So our A7 chord, we're adding the sharpened ninths. Then again, to simplify it, we go to a normal G chord, to the diminished G sharp diminished seventh, diminished chords, so 1 2 1 2, and you can actually play them. Oops, up the fingerboard. Hold on. So every 4 frets. Doesn't matter where you play that G chord. But as we're playing our G down here, I would say it's easier just to pop down to a 1 2 1 2. Used in a lot of jazz. Back to the A minor 7, back to the D7, to the G, A7, D7, and then the G7 with the flattened fifth, which again we play there, and we slide up to the fourth. So again, it's a mix of simple chords, but because there are already quite a lot of seventh chords in there, you don't need to go over the top with that. Adding in that sharpened ninth will just give you a real nice crunchy jazz chord right in the middle of it. You've got the diminished seventh, which is, you know, a tricky one to get used to, but once you're used to it, it's a great chord because, like I say, you can move it around. A minor seventh, and then keep it nice and straightforward with the D7, the G, A7, D7, until you get to the G7. By having a jazz chord right on the end there, you're really kind of emphasising the jazz element of it. That is, let me check, all the chords that you need in the song. So that's everything in the song. The biggest takeaway from this is counting the notes up of the chords to work out sixth chords, ninth chords, added note chords. It means that if you're looking at a piece of music, you can try those out. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But if you want to make something jazzy, the chords that I've given you here, by any means, are not extensive in the jazz world. There's hundreds of different jazz chords that you can put in. These will get you 90% of the way of turning any song into a jazz version. You know, thinking about major seventh chords instead of major chords. Thinking about minor chords with the added ninth. What tends to happen is a lot of the sharpened chords are left to go onto those cadences. So a cadence is where you play the fifth chord going to the first chord. So in the key of C, fifth chord is G, and normally that will be a G seventh chord. So when you see, if you're in the key of C, you see a G seventh chord, that's when you can start adding in the sharpened notes and those real crunchy chords. The root chord of any song, again, if we're in the key of C, a sixth chord works really well. A second chord or a ninth chord can also work with a root chord. The fourth chord in any key, and again, if we're in C, our fourth chord is always going to be an F chord, whether it's an F minor or an F major, but a major seventh always seems to work nicely on a fourth chord. And I say they're not rules, so in jazz you don't kind of stick to the rules, because that's why it's jazz. And the saying is there's no wrong notes in jazz, and I totally agree with that. If you're soloing in jazz and you play a wrong note, as long as you then move it to a right one, it sounds jazzy. That is my jazz tip of the day, because that's what I do all the time. And but adding in those sixth notes and sharpened notes, ninth notes, they'll turn anything. If you're playing in the key of G, for instance, just again apply that same theory. So if you're doing a G and you want to do a G6 chord, let's say, bongo boy, what's our note that we want to add into a G6 chord?
E.
How would we do that? We would, because we've got an E string, just literally take that note off, G6 chord. If we're saying the fourth chord in any key, so if we're in the key of G, bongo boy, your music theory is coming on very well. If we're in the key of G, what's the fourth chord in the key of G?
C.
C, yeah. And we're saying that a C major seventh would work nicely on a fourth chord. So if we were playing our G6 and then we wanted a C major seventh, that's our C chord. C major seventh, what note do we need to add in to the C chord? Bongo boy.
C.
Really should have got you a camera for this video. No. C major seventh. So C seventh,
B.
flat, because it's always a flatted note on the
Flat.
seventh. So B flat, and then C major seventh is just moving it up there. So C chord is the third fret, C major seventh, second fret. I'm not sure I said that the seventh note was always flatted, so you might need to put a little asterisk in there. You can try these chords out in any piece. Anything at all that you're doing. If you're playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, you could probably do a jazz version. Let me think of the chords. So you're doing a C6 instead of a C. E minor. So the third chord, let's make that a E minor with an added ninth. Bongo boy, what's our added ninth?
F. Sharp.
Sharp. Let's make it an E minor 7 rather than an E minor ninth. So we've got somewhere. E minor 7 is with a D. What's an E minor 7th chord? Bongo boy's looking very confused at the minute. We're going to an A minor after that. Make it an A minor 7th. And then we're in the key of C and we're saying our F works well as a major 7th. Oh, that's lovely. And then back to a C. We've just jazzified Somewhere Over the Rainbow. C6, I would actually make it an E minor 7th, an A minor 7th, and then an F major 7th, which works really nicely. You have to try them. Sometimes a ninth will work, sometimes a sixth will work, sometimes a minor 7th will work. But you can work out those chords. So if you've got basic chords, you can work out trying them by counting up the scale. Try adding ninths in, sixes in. You know, the flattened fifths and sharpened fifths are a bit trickier. But if you're going to the fifth chord in any key, that's where to try a sharpened fifth, for instance. So again, if you're in the key of G, the fifth chord is D. Adding in a sharpened fifth is adding in an A sharp or a B flat, whichever way you look at it. Probably when you're talking sharpened fifths, it's easier to think A sharp, I'm guessing. And that's where those sharpened fifths will work. I hope that's kind of made sense, because we did a lot of this over a number of weeks and I wanted to condense it down into a shorter video. I'm not sure it's been any shorter. It feels like weeks we've been filming this. Hopefully I've been on the chat and we've been watching this together, and if you've got any questions you can ask them. If you've still got questions after this, feel free to email us at hello@AnarchyInTheUkulele.com. I think that's right, yeah. And we'll see how you're getting on. Send us some videos, let us know how you're getting on playing Ain't Misbehaving. Try out a different song. Let me think of a song for people to try out. Try out something really simple. Stand By Me in a G, which is a G, E minor, C and D, I believe. Try something different. No, that doesn't work. That's nice. D7 with sharpened fifth. Sharpened fifth is an A sharp. So, we'd go something like that. I mean, I quite like that. I haven't heard a jazz version of Stand By Me. Yeah, try out some of the songs. Let me know how you're getting on. And yeah, I'd love to see somebody putting in some sixes, ninths, sharpened fifths. What else did we have? Flattened second, which is the same really as a sharpened ninth. Depends which way you look at it. That's a lovely chord, by the way. G7, slide it up. Absolutely awesome chord. If you're in the key of C, playing a G7, and you're in a ukulele group, add that one in. Everyone else will stop playing and stare at you and go, "What the f*** are you doing?" But you can teach them all a G7 with a flattened second, and they will love it. They will love it, and they will think that you're amazing. Please do like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And maybe we'll do more jazz chords at some point. It depends how well Bongo Boy edits this video into a coherent video.
Take a while.
We'll see. Cool. And we'll see you next time.